Welcome to today's reading vlog where I'm going to be reading a couple haunted house horror books simply because the next couple of books I was interested in reading happen to all be about haunted houses. This was truly an accident. This video was originally going to be a different type of vlog, and then I ended up DNFing a book and it kind of reshaped itself because I realized the books I was reading were both haunted house books. And I'm still doing this, so I don't know if I'm only reading 2 books or 3 books in this, so the books I'm reading in this vlog all happen to be about haunted houses, whether that's 2 or 3. Who knows? I don't know how far this is going to go. But I do know that this is something I wanted to do for a while, is just read a group of haunted house books and truly discover what I do like and what I don't like in haunted house books, because I'm still trying to sort of figure out what subgenres of horror are my favorite. I know I really like psychological horror, but when it comes to the supernatural or the paranormal umbrella in particular, I don't know what I like and what I don't like. Do I like monsters and creature features, ghosts? Do I like it to feel like it's ghosts but then have a real world explanation? I don't know. So I thought this would be fun to just vlog my experience reading a couple haunted house books and try to sort of pinpoint what I like and what I don't like. So like I mentioned, at this point, I am still in the midst of filming the vlog, so I don't know what all I will be reading in this video, but you can see it in the thumbnail and you're gonna see it as soon as we proceed. So I'm just going to send you right on into the video where I was starting with The Spite House by Johnny Compton. I am 50% through The Spite House, so I thought it was a good time to go ahead and check on in. I was planning on checking in earlier in the book, but I've just been kind of reading and not vlogging as much, so we're getting a midway update on this one. I really didn't have any expectations going into this book, really wasn't sure even what it was going to be about because I kind of forgot. If you don't know, that's how I like to go into books. I like to look out for books, put them on my radar, read the synopses, be interested in them, and then by the time I get around to reading them or by the time they come out, I usually have forgotten what it's about, but I know the past me was interested in it. Sometimes I'll refresh myself with the synopsis, but for the most part I try to just read like a high-level blurb if I read anything at all because I like to be surprised by books. It turns out that this book is following this family. You're following a dad named Eric and his 2 daughters, Des and Stacy. Des is the older daughter, who I believe is 18 or maybe 17. She's very close to being an adult if she's not one, and they are on the run from something, but you don't really know the full details of it. The mom is not in the picture. You don't really know what happened. They're very secretive about their lives and they're kind of going from motel to motel trying to make it by. And Eric ends up seeing this opportunity to take this job where he will move into this house and record any paranormal activity in the house and get a huge payout to live there for, I think it's a month. So he decides to go check out the house with his 2 daughters and they move into the house. And that is pretty much the setup of the story. That's pretty much where we're at the 50% mark. Honestly, it was a little bit of a slower start. I thought the first 20%, 25-ish% of the story, I was really liking the writing style. I was really liking getting to know the characters. You get a ton of different POVs in this one. It just seamlessly jumps from Eric's POV to his daughters to people they're interacting with, and you're learning more about the background of these characters and the background of this house that they're moving into by getting all these different perspectives. So I like how it's jumping between all the perspectives. I did not expect that at all. I thought it was going to be all from Eric or maybe just like him and his daughters, but you get to hear from a lot of different people along the way, which I am liking, and that got me engaged in the story really quickly. Then I'll say like the 25% to 50% mark has felt a little bit slow to me, so I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing the story pick up again for me in the second half. I didn't realize what a spite house was, and so I had to look it up to learn a little bit about it, so I'm interested to see what the background of this one's going to be. In case you also don't know, a spite house is a house that was built to spite someone else basically. So they're typically these really thin houses. There's a famous one in, I think it was Virginia, that I saw where the person who built it like hundreds of years ago ended up building it because they lived in this house and there was an alleyway and they didn't like all the noise in the alleyway, so they built a house in the alleyway so that there couldn't be an alley right beside their house. So that's an example of it, but I'm sure there's a lot of other types of reasons these happen, but I just thought it was really interesting because I've never heard of a spite house. So I'm interested to learn more about the background of the house in this story because I feel like that's going to be really important, and it is setting up some nice suspense and eerie vibes because you don't know the backgrounds of these characters. You don't know what's going on with the situation where this woman is willing to spend a lot of money paying people to live in a house and record paranormal activity, which is super strange. So there are mystery elements to piece together in the story as well, which is keeping me hooked. But yeah, a little bit stalled out right now. I'm ready for some more things to start happening. So I'm gonna keep reading and I will check in again with you when I am further in the book or when I finish the book. I finished The Spite House, and overall I did enjoy this one. I don't think it's going to be a standout favorite for me. I feel like this was just a pretty solid haunted house story, but I don't think it's one that's going to stick in my memory super vividly or, like I said, be a favorite of mine. If you're just looking for a good haunted house story, definitely recommend it. Think it's worth picking up. I really liked the family dynamics in this one and the characters and just this father who would do anything to protect his daughters. And there is an interesting element in the story as well that would be a spoiler to tell you about, so I will not reveal that, but I did think that was super cool. There was just these things that some characters had in common that I felt like was the most interesting part of the story and that I really would have liked to keep exploring further. I think what keeps this from being a standout favorite for me is overall it was just kind of a slow first half of the story, and then the second half was still good, but I don't know, I just never felt entirely gripped with it. It didn't feel overly scary to me. I felt like it was more scary in the beginning half of the book with just building up this anticipation around the house and the anxiety around the house and knowing that bad things had happened there. But once they got in the house, I wasn't particularly feeling that tension anymore for some reason. Not that there wasn't scary things happening, but it just wasn't effective for me. There's a couple things I wish it would have done a little bit differently. I wish we could have gotten some journal excerpts from the people who lived there before, because I think their story is super creepy and would have really added a lot to the story to see some of that coming into it. A lot of what the story revolves around is this idea of spite and holding on to anger, and that being a fuel for this haunted house because it is a spite house, which I thought was a cool element to bring this haunted house to life in that way. But there was almost too much going on with the history of the house that was handed so quickly that I felt like I wasn't, I don't know, not that I wasn't grasping it, I was understanding it all, but it just didn't have that impact that I was looking for some reason. So overall, this book ended up being about a 3.5 for me. I think it was a good time. It was a solid haunted house story. I think it's worth reading. It was a quick read. I just wanted something more from it that I can't exactly put my finger on. Probably just overall spook factor, I think, is what I was looking for more of. So that was The Spite House, and next I'm going to be reading Tell Me I'm Worthless. Same spot. I've started Tell Me I'm Worthless. I'm 25% into the story and wanted to give you a first early impression of the book. So far, I am blown away by the writing. The way this is written is so intricate and it is very show not tell, and I'm loving that. It is building up such intrigue into these characters, and it's a little bit confusing, but I like it that way. Like, it's just throwing you into the world and it's showing you all these things, and it's forcing you to catch up and figure out what's going on. I think we're going to be following two main characters, Alice and Ela, but I don't know how you say Ela's name because I thought it was Ela, but then in Ela's perspective, there's a moment where someone calls her Ela and she's like, that is not technically the correct pronunciation of my name, but it's fine. But she doesn't say how to pronounce it correctly. So I don't know if it's Isla, but Ela makes more sense to me, so that's how I'm going with it until I get further clarification. But these two used to be friends, and then something horrible happened between them a couple years ago at this haunted house, and now they are on different sides of life and political ideologies, and something just happened between them, and you don't really know exactly what. According to the synopsis, I haven't gotten to this point in the story yet, but apparently what's going to happen is Alice and Ela are going to reunite to go back to that house. They're going to face the horrors that happen there, pull themselves apart from the inside out, put their differences aside, and try to rescue Hannah, who went with them initially, whom the house has chosen to make its own. And just the idea of these two characters getting together just seems so unbelievable at this point, because just seeing how far apart they are right now and not really knowing why. I mean, it is very interesting, and I don't want to give away too many details of the story, but it has immediately hooked me. It has immediately pulled me in. I absolutely love the way it's written. It feels so like artsy in a way, and I'm really, really interested to learn more about these characters and just try to piece together what happened 3 years ago, what's happening now, what's going to happen when they go back to the house. You also get the perspective of the house in the story, so you get Alice's perspective, Ela's perspective, and then the house's perspective. I don't know if we're going to get more. That's the three that I've been introduced so far, and I love in haunted house stories when the house really becomes a character, so I think that's really cool that they're doing that as well. How you get pulled into the story so far is you meet Alice first, and you're kind of understanding Alice's life. Alice is a transgender woman, and she's going to a party, and she is just haunted. That is the best way to describe everything about her life. She's so haunted. And she meets this girl and they're hooking up together. She brings her back to her place, and then this creepy haunting thing happens and the girl freaks out and leaves. But you don't know, like, is it really happening? Or is it just happening in her mind and she's doing something weird and that's what's freaking the girl out? So I don't know which way we're gonna go with that. And you know, from her end, she's got this scar, like a literal scar on her head from what happened with Hila, and she has just villainized Hila in her mind. But Hila's been reaching out and sending her some messages lately, so it just seems really weird with what's going on there. And then you get Hila's perspective, and then you're seeing what she's doing. And at first she's walking through this protest, and it's a trans rights protest. And so you're kind of trying to figure out where she belongs in all of this. And she's heading to this building in particular. She's like really nervous to be amongst this protest. So you're like, okay, does she not support trans rights? What's going on? And she gets to this building and goes into the space to be in this meeting. And it's like a turf gathering. It's like an anti-trans protest. So you're like, what happened between Hila and Alice to make them be friends and now be like on such opposite ends? And you know, like Hila does some kind of radio show, or she's been on a radio show talking about why she is against trans people. And then she gets up at this meeting and tells this story, which I'm not going to tell you all the details of, but like she tells a story about what happened between them, and you're like, what is going on? So I don't know. I'm so pulled into this. I absolutely love the writing style. I cannot wait to see where this is going to go. I saw that this has to do with fascism as well. And there's like content warnings in the beginning of the story too about a lot of the different things that you need content warnings for, which I appreciate because it's already gotten pretty heavy themes, only 25% of the way in. So I can tell this is going to be a darker story. But I was just looking at some Goodreads reviews too. And the idea around fascism, like the house is going to be representative fascism in some way. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I'm just very intrigued. Only 25% of the way in. So I'm very excited to keep reading, and I will let you know more once I know more. Quick update on Tell Me I'm Worthless. I just got to part 2 in the story. I'm 55% of the way through, and I should be done with it in about an hour and a half. So I plan on just pushing all the way through and finishing it. I just started it this morning, so it's just been a one-day reading experience. I'm getting through it very quickly because I'm just so confused and I just want to know what's going to happen next. And I'm trying to get a better sense of the bigger picture of the story. I usually find that if I'm reading a book that's very confusing, I can read it really quickly because something about it being confusing makes me really enjoy reading it and trying to figure out what's going on. But sometimes it teeters the line too far where I'm just too confused and not having a good time. This is written in a very artsy style. It is very moody. It doesn't feel like a lot is actually happening. It kind of reminds me of Mona Awad's writing style or Otessa Moshfegh's writing style. It's just very slow moving and heavy. It just feels really heavy. But we just got to the part in the synopsis where these two characters, Alice and Hila, are going to come together and return back to the house, which is kind of similar to how the Spite House was, where it took the first 50% to even get to the full part of the synopsis to even get them to the house. So I do wish things would have moved more quickly. I wish we would have gotten into that more quickly. I felt the same about the Spite House. But also this is a story about so much more than just a haunted house that I can see why it had such buildup. But maybe it would have been nice to not know that in the synopsis so that it would have been like a surprise at this point. But I don't know. Anyway, I feel like the story is going to take a turn since they're now going to the house. Really no idea where the story is going to go. Quite confused, but not so confused that I can't follow the story. But I just feel like it's a book that you understand better upon a reread, maybe? I don't know. It's one of those books I'm gonna finish and I'm gonna have to read a lot of reviews and articles, I'm sure, to piece it all together, unless I have some aha moment in the second half. But so far, we're just making our way through it. We're having a good time though. It's written well. We're definitely intrigued. So yeah, I'm gonna finish the book now and I'll let you know what I think when I'm done. So I finished Tell Me I'm Worthless, and that book took me on a journey. I'm just gonna say it went completely over my head. Not sure what I read. Initially I was saying it was confusing, but I was loving it, and it was still something I was able to follow, and it was making me more intrigued with the story. But by the ending, I was just confused. I did not know what I was reading. I didn't understand the point. I feel like this book is doing a lot and it's just too smart for me. It's just too smart for me, and that's okay. I've seen really great reviews for this. I've been reading a lot of reviews. I've been looking at what other authors have to say about it in the blurbs they've written. I've been reading reviewers' reviews of this, and a lot of people have a lot of intelligent things to say about this book. I unfortunately do not. I just didn't get it. I would love to read you excerpts of some parts of the ending that aren't spoilery at all, because it just reads like stream of consciousness and you don't know how it's related really at all to the story, so it won't be a spoiler. But I feel like if I read them to you, I could probably get demonetized because of some of the things. So if possible, I will put a screenshot up here of some of the excerpts that I was reading to my partner as I was reading the end of the book, just to highlight to him how confused I was, and he was equally confused, and he said, "Ashley, what are you reading?" So again, I know a lot of people have a lot of intelligent things to say about the book, and they got a lot out of it and they took a lot away from it. I think, you know, from the experience I had when I was still following what was happening, the author has a lot of promise. It was written super well, very intriguing, and based off of what other people have to say, seems like a pretty powerful book. But from just like a base level average reader coming into this, I did not feel like it was a super accessible haunted house story, but everything doesn't have to cater to me, you know, so I'm not blaming it for that, but I do think it's important to note. I talk about that when I talk about things like Mona Awad's writing. Like, it's not a book that you just read and you don't have to think anything about it and you just get this like popcorn reading experience from it. It's something that you have to like sit and stew and do some research on to fully get all the pieces of it, and that is definitely how this book is as well. So overall, I'm going to leave it with not rating it, because I don't see how I could possibly put a rating on something that I just didn't really understand. I do think that the writing was really good. The characters really came to life for me. There's some really interesting things going on with the characters and how they mirror each other, and they make me question if all of the characters even really existed, which is just mind-boggling to me. And I personally prefer hearing other people's thoughts about this book, because for me, it's no thoughts, head empty. It's just one of those books that like you could write a whole academic piece on what this book is doing for the haunted house genre, what this book is doing for the trans community, what this book is doing about politics, and there's just so much in there. And yeah, I mean, it was an experience. So I think that's going to conclude my journey with a couple haunted house books for this vlog. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this was never really an intended trope vlog anyway. It just kind of worked out that way because I was reading a couple books that happen to both be about haunted houses, and I decided to group them together in this vlog experience. I do not think I answered any of my questions that I have relating to if I do enjoy haunted house stories or not. The two books that I read were completely different. They were doing completely different things, but they were both utilizing the haunted house trope to bring a broader social message and a broader social commentary. And I think that is the thing that is true of horror as a genre in general, but is also especially true of the haunted house trope. And it's interesting how both of these books really placed themselves in the history of the haunted house trope and made specific references or had specific nods to classic haunted house stories like The Haunting of Hill House or The Turn of the Screw. You could see these references, and sometimes they were even blatantly made to these classics in the genre. And these authors were really intentionally placing themselves in the tropes and the genres, but also in some ways subverting those tropes and those genres. So I think there's a lot that can be said about haunted house books. I think there's a lot I still have to discover. I'm sure I will do this again and maybe read a different type of range of haunted house books, because it is just so broad reaching. And both of these books were being very intentional with building a modern takeaway from the story, like placing themselves in the modern moment with the haunted house and talking about politics and talking about race and talking about gender and talking about sexuality. And it might be nice to also just read some more simple haunted house stories, like your classic just being in a haunted house and having a spooky experience and not having a million things to say, but I also think that's great. All that to say, I'm sure I'm gonna do a video like this again where I read some haunted house books. I wanna read a wide range of haunted house books. I wanna read some classic stuff. I wanna read some modern stuff. I wanna read some simple stuff. I wanna read some complex stuff. So if you have any recommendations for haunted house stories that you've loved or that you've had on your radar, definitely leave those in the comments below so that I can build up a list to curate for doing this again in the future, since this was all just kind of an accident anyways. But despite its accidental conception, I hope you enjoyed the video anyways. I know I still had fun reading both of these books and just having two very different experiences with them. And if you've read either of them, let me know down in the comments below what you think about them as well. I think The Spite House comes out in February. Tell Me I'm Worthless comes out, I believe, today, the day that I'm filming this portion. So hopefully people will get a chance to read some of these, or let me know if you're thinking about picking them up as well. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!